Turn the mic up. This is legacy emotion. For vision of victory, trailblazing the path. Mind sharp, words heavy, every bar got class. Iconic by nature, pioneer by design. History in the making every time she aligns. Doctorate dreams, but the roots run deep. Built from the grind, now the whole world speaks. Culture, purpose, power when she steps in the room. Drop gems so real, make the future zoom. Yeah.
This is iconic pioneers. Hear the story unfold, where the fearless lead and the truth gets told. Every voice legendary, every lesson precise. Often with wisdom, Dr. Tabatha Russell on the mic. Press play. Stay ready. The movement starts now.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into Iconic Pioneers Podcast, where this space, we have the opportunity to interview disruptors, trailblazers, and bold thinkers who gather to rewrite the rules of success. I'm your host, Dr. Tabatha Russell, and on this show, we go deep with those who aren't afraid to lead differently, those who are building legacy, impact, and authority that echoes for generations. Now, on today, I am so excited because I have the opportunity to be interviewing a pioneer himself, Mr. John Hart. Welcome in, sir.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me here.
Yes, I am so excited to jump into this conversation with you here on today. If you will, sir, please introduce yourself to the audience.
All right. Well, my name is John Hart. Sometimes you'll see it like on LinkedIn, it'll say John W. Hart III. That name has always caused me some pride and also quite a bit of consternation because especially when you're trying to work your ID, it's awfully hard having a third on there. I'm a co-founder with my wife of Grounded Leadership Coaching and Consulting. That's the business that we run now. That's actually a relatively recent enterprise for us. I was only recently retired as a chief risk officer of a bank in Australia. I lived in Australia for 14 years before coming back to America last year. And I have Australian citizenship as well. But prior to that, I worked for GE and before that, JP Morgan Chase. I had vice president positions in both those organizations. So I've been in financial services type businesses for most of my career, and at least half of that I've been in senior executive positions, and as I said, in the C-suite for like the last 7 years.
I love it. Did I not tell you guys that he was a pioneer? Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. So what does being an iconic pioneer mean to you personally?
Oh my golly. Sorry. This is hard because I believe that I try to live a kind of a humble and modest life, and putting a title like iconic pioneer sounds like something that's really super special or something like that, and so it's hard for me to claim that title for myself. But I do believe, though, when I look back on my career, that there have been things that I have done that some might consider iconic, in that it does a good job of representing leadership in a different kind of a way, and in a way that actually, that's why I loved being a part of the Dare to Lead Differently Summit that Brigadier General Tia put on for us, but for all of us. But so I can talk to you a little bit today about what I think about what my style has been that has been different, and that could be considered perhaps, I don't mind thinking of it as iconic if I think of it as an example that I set for a different way than is often commonly seen as an approach in business and in life. So that's one part of it. The other thing, when you talk about iconic, you also say pioneer, and that's a little bit challenging for me also, because I actually see what's different about my style and my approach is is something that's not new, and pioneering gives me the impression of going into new territory or something like that. And I actually find my roots like 2,000 years ago, you know. So I feel like, though, sometimes it can be a little bit pioneering to recognize that we're in a new world today, and there's a lot of new things that are going on. And how do you then find the right balance to approach the new while preserving some of the ancient wisdom that is out there, and actually leveraging that ancient wisdom in sometimes what maybe could feel like new ways? Because I'll tell you, a lot of my experiences have been something that other people would look at and go, "Wow, that was an interesting approach," you know. But there are a lot of other people. Frankly, I think I stand on the shoulders of great leaders like John Maxwell, for example, who I think is an iconic, humble man who really loves everybody that he works with. And that's really the kind of spirit that I try to bring into what I'm doing. And it's a little bit unfortunate that that's a little bit less common in today's world. But I think that style needs leaders, needs voice. And frankly, it's not always as easy as it sounds. And so it's helps to work through how do you actually, in the complexity of today's world, how do you live a life and lead in that way?
Yes, I absolutely love how you looked at iconic pioneer, right? Like for me, when I think about just the little bit that I know about your journey and the things that you've done over the course of time, is that I see that as being iconic and pioneering from the standpoint of really still holding intact your humility,
Mm.
right? The fact that you have done some such amazing things that people only dream of. They'll probably give their right arm, their left leg, and they'll walk around, a little imbalanced just to have the positioning that you had or some of the opportunities. So I will say, thank you so much for sharing that, because we all have our opportunity to put our own stamp on every single step that we make, all the opportunities that are afforded to us, and really do some things differently. So thank you so much for sharing that. And tell me also, what is a defining moment when you realized that you weren't built to follow the crowd?
Oh, interesting. A defining moment. Well, I've had several defining moments that you said when you weren't built to follow the crowd. That's kind of interesting, because some of the things that I did that started to make me think a little bit differently about life would have happened like when I was in Bible camp when I was a teenager, right? And and but what's funny is that, I wasn't the only one who was kind of having those ideas and having those experiences. That can be a really emotional experience, and that's when I first felt like I was called, to a different kind of a life. And I wondered then if I was called into ministry. And but then, but by that time, I had such a plan in my life. I was going to be a pilot in the Air Force, and I had all my plans worked out towards that. So I just kept marching to the plan that I had, and figured that that's not really what God intends for me to do, because if that was the case, I would have had better instruction a little bit earlier before I got all the other plans going, right. Well, but that began that those were important first experiences in my life of thinking that there's more to life than just than what I was going to be planning to do, in the Air Force. And really, I say the Air Force, but quite honestly, there was a part of me that actually wanted to fly, just wanted to fly. I thought I'd be a commercial pilot afterwards, and so forth. Well, unfortunately, once I got into college, my eyesight began to deteriorate, and I had been in the Air Force ROTC, and I was in the pilot program. Right at that point, that only meant that you were slotted to be able to be a pilot, but But you had to always stay in top-notch physical condition, or they would give that place to somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
My eyesight began to deteriorate, then that dream was over. So then I was lost for a while, trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. And then but all the time I was a youth leader at the church that I was attending, and I also just started another job. I got the only job I went to the newspaper, and I finally found a job working for American Express as a clerk there, right? So that began my career in financial services. But I was working 40 to 60 hours a week, and I was just making a paycheck, right? And it seemed like, wow, I'm spending an awful lot of my time just making the money so I can keep being the person who's doing all this work for somebody else and not for me. And the most fun I was having and the most fulfillment I was getting was from the volunteer work I was doing in the evenings, and especially on Wednesday night with the youth group, and on the Sundays, with the youth. And I finally thought, oh, maybe it would be better for me if I got paid for the things I like doing.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I went back to college. I got my BA in psychology, and then I went to Princeton and got a Master of Divinity there, and then I was a pastor for a while. But that was early in my life. I was a young man, and I was idealistic, and I thought that the church should be a lot more than what the church was, and I thought that Jesus gave us an example to live in ways that I wasn't seeing firsthand in the church. I was seeing too much division. I was experiencing too much fighting, too many people who were building walls rather than building bridges, and that didn't end up being very comfortable for me. So then ultimately I ended up, because of some devastating circumstances that happened in our family, we ended up moving back home to Arizona, where we were from before we went into the church. And from there, I just had to start all over again. So that's why I ended up with a career in financial services, a longer career. I was only in the ministry after I was ordained for about almost 5 years. But then for the rest of my career, I've been in financial services. And what's interesting is what got me to really be confident when I went to work for Chase. I actually felt like I had more opportunity there to live a life of building bridges than I found in the church, because the Chase at the time had these very important diversity initiatives, and that diversity it was so much more. It wasn't about tolerating differences. It was about recognizing and celebrating differences. It was about bringing us all together and becoming a much better place and a much better culture and a much better organization, a much more successful organization when you acknowledge the diversity and leverage the strengths around you. That was really what began for me to change the way that I think, because that began to open my mind to a realization that I don't know all the truth, and I never know it all, and I can't know it all. But when I am in community with other people, and when I listen to other people, and then when we listen to each other, we can only then begin to build a better understanding of, even if it's just the situation that we're dealing with, if it's a simple decision that needs to be made, or if it's how we're going to live our lives more broadly, either as individuals or as a community, we've got to leverage the voices around us. And that's that. When you talked earlier, I spoke about my humility, and you commented on it as well. I don't know if it's really humility so much as I've just learned that I always arrive at what I think are better answers, more appropriate, more effective answers, and better relationships when I don't come in thinking that I'm absolutely know all the answers already. That the diversity around you needs to be leveraged, and because then all of us can get to a better place that way. So that was I think a really defining moment for me, and that's quite frankly how I found, even though I felt the call to ministry, how I felt satisfaction in the work that I was doing there. And over time, I got to have roles through financial services where I could actually still have an impact on people's lives, and felt like I could lead the organization also to have a broader impact on people's lives that was really still going to make a difference. but I always had a desire to actually do coaching.
Mm.
But I couldn't do it because I kept my dreams contained, because
Mm-hmm.
somehow I'd have to find a way on my own. I
Mm-hmm.
didn't trust enough all the resources around me or my source.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and and so it wasn't until I retired and then I could have a bit of a stable income from that, right? Take the risk that you have to take
Right.
on the long journey that it takes to begin to build,
Mm-hmm.
and so forth.
Yeah, I love your perspective on that, as well as the journey that has helped you to become and really get into what it is that you do today. I too was in the corporate space in call centers specifically,
Mm-hmm.
where you have the opportunity to deal with a lot of different moving parts on a regular basis, personalities, policy changes, new products and services, all the things happening all the time. But I like how you take it back to your foundation and your experience with the Lord that has really helped to lead and guide you throughout this process, and how you still embrace that today. I believe that having that at the center point of our being helps us to navigate those various different places, as well as you mentioned about now being in the coaching space, and how having some sort of stable income helps you to be able to embrace that kind of with ease, right? Not having the stress of where's the next dollar going to come from, because I quite often like to say that the entrepreneurial journey is not for the faint of heart. Right.
No.
This is not something that you're going to do today and say, oh, forget that. I'm not going to do that tomorrow. But it is the journey of 1,000 miles, right? Every single day, there's an opportunity to make an impact, to help somebody to do some things differently. So, how do you balance building wealth, influence, and impact without sacrificing your authenticity?
Well, that's interesting because that's sort of what I had to do while I was leading corporate America and then corporate Australia, right? So because there are a lot of times when when there are decisions that are being made that aren't always. Sometimes the key objective of a particular decision is to make money or to satisfy the shareholders. But I got to tell you, most shareholders really want a sustainable business, and they recognize that you have to be good to your customers and you have to be good to your employees and everybody, and you have to take care of regulators, and in addition to making the profit, right? In fact, profitability is preserved if you take care of all those other things. So most shareholders believe that, but sometimes the decision making in management becomes we've got to hit these financial results no matter what the cost, right? So that does challenge you sometimes. But what I found was every organization that I was a part of always had a vision and always had values. Sometimes they also recognized that they had a purpose, especially after Simon Sinek came around and was telling the world how important the why is. The companies began focusing a little bit more also on a purpose that underlies even the vision. And I found that that's always where I resonated. That's the space that I went to, because the published visions of these organizations or even of the departments that I was a part of were always usually well thought out, and almost always it turns out to be recognizing a purpose that is good for others. It's about the service that you have to provide to others. It's about the good that you can do in the world. And so that's where I found integrity, and that's where I found authenticity, because I would read those visions and I would read the value statements and recognize this is how we want to live. And I can look on those things and I can say, yep, that's how my Lord would want me to live my life, right? And that's where my values are, so I can align to that. So that, in fact, that's why I ended up being very much of a grounded leader throughout my time in those kinds of fields, and why now I call my business grounded leadership, because I found that that's the way that you can have integrity, that you can maintain your authenticity, is to first of all know who you are, know where your roots are, know where your grounding is, and keep returning to that over and over again. So that
Mhm.
I can tell. Can I? I don't know how much. You have to direct me because I could just probably talk on and on. But can I tell you
You're
about?
good. You can share.
Okay, I'll just give you an example that illustrates this point. Now, you have to imagine, first of all, when I first went to Australia, I was the head of risk operations there. And among my operational responsibilities that were risk related was the collections organization. And these are the people who, and most of our portfolio was mortgages, right? There were also some credit cards and some personal loans and things like that, but it was mostly mortgages. So mostly the people that were on my team that I was working with were focused day in and day out in this call center, talking to people who were in very difficult circumstances of their lives.
Yeah.
And but in reality, they weren't just trying to get money for the bank, right? They weren't trying to get people to stick to their commitments to repay the loan that they had taken. They were genuinely interested in helping people who were in difficult circumstances to
Mhm.
find out, and we offered all kinds of alternatives so those people could be helped out. But it was still a very difficult job. We had a vision that was to enhance the financial well-being of our people, of the customers, the communities that we serve, right? But to enhance the financial well-being. And I talked to them then about, I really loved that vision because that told me that I was working for an organization that was, by the way, the economy, I mean, the banking rather, and credit is a lifeblood of the economy.
Yeah.
There's no big building that's ever been. Many entrepreneurs can never do what they would do and make the investment that they need to make up front in order to do it without getting some kind of credit,
Right.
right? So,
Right.
so having credit working in the economy is what has helped the world to advance the way that it has. Every big building you see anywhere was built on credit, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
all careers ultimately were built on. Think people have student loans, right? They're built their career on credit.
Mhm.
Everything, and how many people live in their houses because of credit, right? So
Mhm.
it really is like the lifeblood of the economy, and we can preserve that by first of all helping the banking or system to be stable and to be financial, but also helping the individual consumers to play their part within it successfully. It's for them to have financial well-being, to work through this difficult time that they have, whatever it is, to get back to a position of having financial well-being. And so I would speak to my people about the importance of having that common vision, that shared vision, kind of like JFK had when he told us that we Americans were going to step foot on the moon by the end of the century, right? And then
Mhm.
everybody rallies around it, and everybody's excited, and everybody has a part to play. And every single time you're on that phone conversation with somebody, every time you have a difficult conversation with somebody, you're contributing to the financial well-being of that individual person, but you're also supporting the financial well-being of this economy, which also ultimately helps us across the world because most of the warfare and most of the violence and most of the evil that we face in the world happens when people are not experiencing financial well-being,
That's right.
blaming somebody else because of all the things that they're not having.
That's
So
right.
that's just an example of how I can, to your point, right? I can actually truly and deeply believe in the good that we are doing,
Mhm.
and then you have authenticity, right? Then you can
That's
speak
right.
to people about that in a way that it cuts through, and it gives them a really good, solid foundation that they can feel good about when they're doing a job that sometimes can be very difficult to do.
Yes, I love that, and I can see how having that buy-in with the vision, right, to help people to now be who they are and show up fully every day when they come to work, right? Or to really get in on the initiatives that you're putting in front of them and run with it because they understand that they're empowered to be able to do that job, right?
Right,
And
right,
so I love, love, love how we have the opportunity to really um, um, integrate that into our daily lives. And when you can affect the whole meaning the masses of people that you're over as far as leadership is concerned, it really does help us to be able to see that there's a bigger job here, not just a job description that they put on paper, but the overarching mission and our purpose that the Lord gives us, right? So what's a myth about leadership or success that you believe that needs to be dismantled immediately?
Um, I think that a myth, I wouldn't say that it needs to be dismantled, but it needs to be supported with a bigger truth, right?
Okay.
I think that there's a myth that you can read a book or go to a seminar or go to a workshop and learn some technique, some strategy for handling some particular leadership situation and think that that's going to somehow solve your problem. This because look, we're regularly encountering challenges with there's hundreds of decisions that we have to make every day, and there are difficult employees and there are difficult people, and some of these things are also happening in our lives. And we become hungry for self-help, for the latest greatest ideas. It's almost as bad as diet fads, right? We're running from one diet to the other because we're trying to find the one that's actually going to work for us.
Right.
And so thinking that you can play on the surface like that and find a new technique, a new I sometimes refer to it as strategy because I think that word is overused a little bit because that's oftentimes a tactic, not a strategy. But thinking that this new tactic is the one that's actually going to work for me. A lot of them are really good, and a lot of them really will work. But oftentimes they will work only in a very specific scenario, and sometimes that scenario only has a limited shelf life, and then that's not really going to help you down the track. So I think that notion has to be supported, is the word I used before. It has to be framed. It has to be given a foundation. That's why I decided, and I've called my business Grounded Leadership, and that's why my focus so much is on grounding. Because whenever I'm coaching clients, inevitably we ask questions about, to try to understand why are they reacting the way that they are in the circumstance that they find themselves in. And it always ultimately comes back to who you are, you believe yourself to be, what your purpose is. It could be your purpose in life. It could be the purpose of the organization. It could be your purpose within that organization. But ultimately, there's something deeper there that's driving you. Why do those things drive you that way? What helps you to stay grounded, and what are you grounded in? Right? And for people who are spiritual and who are open about it, we can very quickly and easily comment about the most important grounding of all, which is your relationship with your source, right? But because then everything flows from that. Your purpose flows from that, and then your vision flows from your purpose, and your values are aligned to that, and then your mission and how you're choosing to live your life. Everything flows from that. But I found that so that to answer your question, the myth is that you can continue to play on the surface and get the long-lasting results that you're looking for.
That's good. That's so good. Because I do believe that for every opportunity that you're given, we'll say to advance in your career or maybe your business or your next level of income, you have to become the person who can steward that level. I am very grounded on that, is that we have to continually be looking at how we become and how we can, invest in ourselves to be able to handle the next place. So you've been talking just a little bit today about you coaching and your leadership academy that you are working on. So tell us just a little bit about that. What's the focus of your coaching business?
Well, it's a little bit obvious by saying grounded, but I have to be careful about that because my focus in coaching is always the client, the client's world. And I absolutely believe in every human, and including my clients, right, in their resourcefulness, in their wisdom, in their creativity, in their ability to come up with and to identify solutions that are going to work best for them in their circumstance. Oftentimes, I find all I have to do is ask the right questions, and they already know the answers, right? Just ask some really powerful questions that gets them to think a little. First of all, sometimes gets them to just take a moment out of all of the crazy busyness and just think. And that in of itself, they're like, why didn't I think of this before? Of course, that's the obvious way forward. And that's gratifying to me when it wasn't even that hard for me. I just sat there and listened and asked the right question, right? So, but it's really important though, because we talked before about the humility and about not believing that you have all the answers. It would be very easy for me to take my experience and say, oh, well, let me tell you about how you have to. I had a situation like that back in 2012, and let me tell you how I solved that one. But sometimes they ask.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Sometimes they say, well, can you tell me what to do? And there's sometimes I will resist that a little bit when I feel like the answer is still within it. But there are also times when people they would like to have some advice, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I can tell you, well, look, here's some things that have worked for me, but you're going to have to decide whether that's going to work for you in your circumstance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And here's some ideas that I have, and sometimes their circumstance is one that really is exactly like the one that I went through, right? So I can give them some advice, on that basis. So my focus is the clients, and it's what's really on their mind, because they know their situation far better than I ever will, and oftentimes they also know what the solutions are. They just need somebody to walk alongside of them to think it through. Now, that having been said, I do ask the questions. And I have to be careful that sometimes I ask those questions in such a way that it's driving them where I actually think they need to go. That's where I have to be careful then to be open and curious all the time to make sure that I'm not leading them where I think they need to go. I got to confirm where it is where they want to go. But oftentimes I have a very strong belief, as I've already articulated, that our answer is almost always within us, but it's always deeper than we're usually taking the time to think.
Yeah.
Encourage them to do a little bit more reflection, to focus more on some self-awareness when they're talking about the situation they have with somebody else, right? Well, what's differently in this situation, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it's grounding. I always have, at least in the back of my mind, and a belief that that this can be solved better for you if you really get focused on your grounding, on who you are and what you're meant to be and what you're meant to do, and frankly, how you want to live your life. How much joy do you really want to have in your life, and what are you willing to do to change your priorities in order to experience that joy in your life?
Yeah. Yeah. I love that you look at, or you allow them to come up with or share with you the vision, right? And you come alongside them. I quite often like to say that coaching is where we meet our clients right where they are, and we walk them forward into their future or their vision,
Yeah.
and help them to have some guided methods on how they get there. And
Right.
I absolutely love that you lead with that, though, because executive leadership coaching is not something that you just decide that, oh, I'm just going to do that and just do it. But no, you've actually lived it
Yeah.
throughout your career, and now having that level of expertise. But the fact that you allow them the space to be able to grow and develop into what it is that they're doing, it means everything, I'm sure, to a lot of your clients. So what are some of the daily habits or rituals that keep you operating at an iconic level or at your peak performance for you?
The most important daily rituals that I have are related to my spiritual well-being, my mental well-being, and my physical well-being, and one that kind of crosses all of those is my relationship with my wife. And so we walk daily. I was using the word walk metaphorically, but that's also a literal reality. It's a literal practice that we have. And the very first thing we do every morning when we wake up is we do devotions together. And it's not just a simple devotion. It's not just, it just literally takes us almost an hour every morning. And we do, by the way, we do get up with the clock always has a 4 at the beginning of it. My wife actually sets her alarm for a number that starts with a 3, but I'm a little bit too groggy for that. So we follow the YouVersion Bible plans, right? And not just that one, but there was also other devotions that we like to do together. Right now we're doing the Bible recap, which is a year going through the entire Bible in a chronological order. And but we do that every morning. And then we do the prayers that are written for you, but then we have our own prayer together where we can pray for each other and over each other. But then that's how we start every day. The very next thing we do after that is feed the dogs, and then we go out on our walk, right? And every day we walk for at least an hour, but it's 2 times a day. So we'll walk in the morning, and we also walk at the end of the day. And then right now we also do a bit of exercise. So that's for our physical well-being as well. And that exercise is right now we're both doing 100. We just began last week a 100-day challenge where we're doing 100 push-ups each day, 100 sit-ups each day, 100 squats each day, plus planks. We're not doing 100 planks, I promise you that. And then we walk the period of time that I talked to you with walking. Now, walking supports our physical well-being, but it's a fantastic opportunity for you as an individual to be out in nature and to just experience the beauty of God's creation, and but then to do it with your partner at the same time. Conversations that you get to have through that. Now, mind you, we've already had an hour of conversations. We were talking about how do we apply what we just learned today, right? And then get to continue talking about, a lot of times the walk talk is a little bit more superficial, more about what's happening in the day, sort of the planning that you have to do and that type of thing, whereas the other stuff is a little bit deeper, right? So and then we come home and I'm always preparing, beginning to prepare our meals for the day, the ones that she has to take to the office or what I'm going to be doing here while I'm working from home. And I think those are some of the key rituals. That just begins today. At the end of the day, we also come together and, there's on LinkedIn, there's these puzzle games that you can do. So we do those together, simultaneously. Sort of. That usually happens like around the dinner table. And at night, we pray for each other again. We pray over each other. We have a very specific set of prayers that we actually repeat that Shirley O'Mardian wrote. It's a book called Prayers for the Praying Husband and Prayers for the Praying Wife, right? So she actually wrote some fantastic prayers that you can pray over each other. And so we also will read a proverb together. We used to read the Proverbs in the morning and a psalm at night. But now our mornings are so full of all of the Bible reading that we're doing that we put the Proverbs at night. So I think those are very important rituals that help us always to stay grounded. And the thing is that the practice itself, if it becomes just a practice, just for the sake of it, then that can still have some value, right? Because it keeps you coming back to your source. But what's really, really important, like anything else, like there are companies that have vision statements and purpose statements and value statements, and they plaster them on the walls, but nobody lives by them.
That's right.
That doesn't help, right? So you can go through the practices, and it may not help. But what's great is when my wife and I do it together, we're a constant accountability and encouragement to one another. And you kind of have to take it seriously when there's a person right there next to you who's likely to ask you a question, what you thought about that, you know what I mean? So it keeps it real, and it keeps it alive, and it keeps us dancing in the spirit, so
yes.
So we can keep that spirit more alive. Now, that having been said, let me be the first to admit also, that doesn't mean that all of a sudden everything I do throughout the day is like from the spirit. I still have the struggles of the flesh like everybody else does. Every now and then get a pop of anxiety or a pop of anger or something. But fortunately, I hope that because of that grounding, she and I both are a little bit able to experiencing those pops less frequently and with less power.
Yeah, yeah. First of all, I love that for you. I've had the opportunity to meet your wife, and she's absolutely amazing. And so, just knowing that you guys take the time, you make the time to do this together, like getting up at 4 a.m., I am sure that you get more done in a day than the average person, right? Probably 60% of America at this point, you get more done because you start your day, but then you're also intentional about the things that you do that incorporates, more your well-being. I like to say that good in, good is going to come out, right? Like, even though anger is there, sometimes that is not the first thing that we pull from, right?
Right.
We pull from all the goodness that we put in, knowing that the other stuff is there, but it doesn't necessarily have to be that thing that we go to. So I absolutely love, 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 love that for you. So for the people that are listening that may not have walked into, their purpose or their power or who they are, they still are questioning that. What's your message to them? Because I really want us to, leave the conversation where people can feel like, you know what, I think I can take a step at trying to go forward on today. But what's your message you would like to leave with them on today?
I would say sometimes it's difficult for people to figure out what their purpose is, and sometimes it's also difficult to get. Some people have so many ideas that then they can't choose. What is it really that I should be doing? So my first recommendation is prayer, especially prayer with other people, prayer in community, right, to help, and also time in the scriptures, because then you get a sense of what the character of God is. And if you really want to discern what God's will might be in your life, it would be really helpful if you have some sense of who God is and what God is like and what God's likely to expect or want from people in the world, right?
Right.
So I think there's a very strong chance. In fact, I'm absolutely certain that God is not going to have a will for you. There's not going to be for the good of other people and for the good of the world, right? So if you've got a purpose, if you think your purpose is making a lot of money and that's the end of it, then you probably need to think about that one again, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, but then if you're going to choose, I think that there are three things that come together that establish your purpose for you. And so it's helpful for you to think about what these things are. What's your passion? Now, some people have a lot of passions, right? But then you're going to have to pick, right? Try to what's the one thing that is what I'm most passionate about? So where's your passion? And then the next thing is, so that's what do you love doing? But then what are you good at doing?
Right.
Right. So in other words, what have you been gifted with? Whatever God wants us to do, He's going to give us what we need to do it. Right.
That's right.
And so just consider, what are your gifts? And then the other one is, what need are you uniquely gifted to meet in the world? Right? So when you can find that there's a legitimate need out there, and you have the gifts to meet that need, and you're passionate about it, all three of those things, it's less likely that you're going to have a lot of options still that are going to meet all three of those. And if you do, then you just got to pick what's the highest on each of those things, the greatest need that you think is out there, the thing that you're best at, and the thing that you're most passionate about, right? Then you find what your purpose is. But then then you have to be prepared to dream and believe in yourself enough. When I say believe in yourself, I'm actually meaning believing in who you are and your relationships with the people who are actually going to be able to deliver that for you. I didn't actually believe in myself for many, many years in my career, like I wished I had. And as a result, I would always contain my dreams. I never dared to dream too big because I always thought I had to be the one to deliver on it. Right? It wasn't until, and my wife has been beautiful for this and giving me an example of somebody who always is happy to dream big, right? because she always believes that she's never alone, So I realized that actually for me, by containing my dreams, I was putting a cap on my faith, right? I was putting
Wow.
God couldn't do that for me because I wasn't even going to go there. But then when you the world opens up to you when you realize you don't have to answer all the questions yourself, and you don't have
That's right.
to run everything yourself.
Yeah, I love that, because I think I've always considered myself to be somewhat of a dreamer. Ever since I was a little girl, I got the opportunity to participate in gifted and talented programs in school. But that also meant, because I grew up in inner city Philadelphia, that meant that I would get up in the mornings. I would catch public transportation all the way to the end. I would catch the L train just to get to my school bus, because they bused us out to the suburbs for me to go to school for those type of programs, because there was nothing available in my immediate area.
Oh, wow.
And as I'm going, I'm riding past these big houses, these fancy cars in the driveway. The houses are spaced out and all these things. And so, needless to say, that I was like 3% of my whole school population, right? I was one in the number.
Yeah.
And so I'd be asking questions. So what does your parents do? And why do you get the opportunity to drive to school every day, and that kind of stuff? And some of the answers is that, my dad is the town's dentist, or my mom, she's the real estate person, or she's the bank manager, or the VP, or something to that degree. And I found from there that I had to do something massively big. First of all, entrepreneurship became a focus of mine. But in my journey to get there, I realized that I needed an education. And so I fell in love with that type of stuff. So I love how all of these parts make us up, and it allows us to really be who we're called to be. So I thank you for sharing the 3 areas around your passion and what you're naturally good at, but then also how we tie all those areas together to come up with our purpose. So that is beautiful. And finally, how can the audience connect with you? Because I know that somebody is wanting to find out more about grounded leadership and how they can find themselves as well. So how can they connect?
I would say that the easiest way would be to go to my website, which is just groundedlcc.com. It's not LLC, which is a phrase that everybody's familiar with. It stands for Leadership Coaching and Consulting, right? So it's groundedlcc.com. Or you can just go on to Instagram. My handle is John the Grounding Coach. All run together, of course, right? And also I have a Facebook page called John the Grounding Coach as well. So I'm not good at posting a lot on Instagram yet. I'm working towards that, or on Facebook. But you'll at least find a link to my website there, or on LinkedIn. I'm John W. Hart III.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining in. And I would love to have you back again so that we can learn just a little bit more about you, what you do, and how things are going as well, because I know that there's a lot ahead of you. So thank you so much for being here on today.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tabatha. It was a great delight.
You're welcome. Thank you. And everybody else, thank you so much for tuning in to Iconic Pioneers, where we just don't build brands. We build blueprints for generations. Remember, icons aren't born. They're built by those bold enough to lead unapologetically. Until next time, keep leading, keep building, and keep breaking every limitation. It has been our pleasure, and thank you so much.
This is Iconic Pioneers. Hear the story unfold, where the fearless lead and the truth gets told. Every voice legendary, every lesson precise. Often with wisdom, Dr. Tabatha Russell on the mic. Press play. Stay ready. The movement starts now.